Hi, I'm Cecily, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about my son before methyl B12 and before HBOT, and a little bit about him after we started working with these. Hudson was in preschool, and he was completely echolalic, and he obviously would just repeat whatever you had just said back to him. I remember picking him up from preschool and saying, "Hudson, what'd you do at school today?" And he'd say, "School today," or either he would just stare out the window and not answer me at all. And I would say, I'd back it up a little bit, and I'd say, "Hudson, did you paint or did you play with puzzles?" And when he would answer, which oftentimes he wouldn't, he'd say, "Paint or play with puzzles." And I'd back it up a little bit more, and if he was still responding, I'd say, "Hudson, did you paint? Yes or no?" And he'd say, "Yes or no," if he was responding that day. And it was very hard because he wasn't truly communicating. He was so anxious. I remember everywhere we went, we had to have a backup plan because you never knew what was going to happen. You never knew how long you were going to be there or under what circumstance you would have to leave. It could be anything. I remember going to the pool one day, and my daughters are a little bit older than Hudson, and we would have these elaborate backup plans. Plan B. What are we going to do if this happens? What are we going to do if this happens? And one of my daughters was in charge of making sure we had my keys and my pocketbook. And I had another daughter who was in charge of pool toys and towels, if we could do that. And we would talk about how we were going to get to the front gate and extract Hudson from the pool as quickly as possible. And I remember one day there was this lady, and we're at a junior Olympic size pool, and there's a sweet little old lady. She was across the pool, and she looks at Hudson and goes, "Hi," and he goes berserk. Now, mind you, she's not in his personal space. He's across the pool from her, and she's just, "Hi." He gets under one of those lounge chairs, those strappy lounge chairs, holds on for dear life. He's shaking the lounge chair. So we enact Plan B, and one daughter's getting my keys and my pocketbook, and the other one's getting the pool toys and the towel. And I'm trying to pull Hudson off of this lounge chair so we can make it as quick and painless an exit as possible, which was hard. And I just remember running out of there when everybody had their jobs. It was so hard. And we had similar Plan Bs at the mall because you never knew what was going to happen. It wasn't necessarily the same thing. And it might happen the first 10 minutes you're there, or it might happen after you've been there an hour. You never really knew what was going to set him off, and you had to have an exit plan. I remember it was so much easier just to stay home, and that's hard when you have two other children. It was very hard. It was hard. I remember even having people over to our house because that was less stressful than going somewhere. And when the families would start coming in, Hudson would run upstairs and start crying, and my husband or I would have to go upstairs and soothe him. We'd have to rock him or try to take him out to the backyard to the swing, where he wouldn't be around people. And if everybody was in the backyard, that was a problem. But he was so hard to soothe, and he was so hard to placate. And I remember too, we'd be sitting at the house even if nothing was going on, and I'd say, "Anybody seen Hudson?" And we got to get a visual. And I'd send my two girls, and we'd all go looking around, and we'd call him, and he wouldn't answer. And a lot of times he'd be upstairs just sitting, not necessarily doing anything, just sitting and gazing off into space, or he'd be lining up toys. It was disheartening. And then to try to get him to engage with you downstairs was hard too, because he didn't want to be there. And holidays, oh, that was hard. We always go to the beach for the holidays, and my as the relatives would come in, he would shut down and go upstairs and try to find a quiet place. And I'm not talking about my second great Aunt Matilda coming in demanding hugs from everybody. I'm talking about my brother and his two boys who are similar ages to Hudson. He not only was he not interested in people, even familiar people, they totally stressed him out. And it was so hard. I remember even eating holiday meals. He couldn't necessarily eat when everybody else was eating, especially if there was more of us than my immediate family of five at the table. It was very disruptive. It was exhausting, and it wasn't living for him or for us. I remember that stress, that those butterflies you get in your stomach, just walking into the mall or walking into a restaurant, or as the people start coming into your home. It was impossible. It was so tough on all of us. So anyway, I hear about this Dan doctor that is local to me, and we go for a visit, and he is practicing Dr. Neubrander's methyl B12 protocol. So he says, okay, Dr. Neubrander suggests, these methyl B12 shots every 3 nights. So that's what we did. And a couple of weeks into the shots, I picked Hudson up from preschool, like I always did, with my, same, okay, we're just going to try, maybe, you never know what's going to happen. So I picked him up from preschool, and I put him in the back, and I'd say, Hudson, what'd you do at school today? And I was, ready for my backup questions, and he said, I played on the ship with Karsten. And I get chills thinking about it. I was scared. I imagined it. I was scared. He didn't even say it, but that he would say, I played on the ship with Karsten. And Karsten was a little boy in his class. I mean, that's prepositional phrases in there too. And it was novel, and it was true. And I couldn't believe it. I was shaking. I thought, oh my gosh, either, what if he didn't say it? What if, I've finally fallen off the crazy train? What if he never says it again? What if? And I was scared. I was excited, and I remember riding home, and I was almost frozen. I was scared to call anybody. I was scared to talk anymore. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what had happened. So anyway, I finally wrap my head around what happened, and I start calling everybody. I call my brother, I call my sister-in-law, I call my mom, I call my dad, of course I call my husband. I called, I think, everybody I knew. I couldn't believe what had happened. And the next day, going into preschool, I was talking to his teacher, and she said, yeah, he did. He played on the ship with Karsten today. And, or yesterday. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, this is incredible. And we hadn't told anybody that we were doing the shots because, it's kind of a novel thing. And, giving shots to your child, might not be met with, I don't know, a lot of grace. I don't know. But as the weeks went by, the therapists were talking to us, what's happened? He's talking, and, he said this. And his preschool teacher was saying, oh, he, withstood somebody painting on the easel on the same page as him, whereas before he could not even tolerate anybody's presence. There were changes. There were definite changes, and we couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe it. We continued with that doctor for a little while, and then that doctor stopped practicing the biomedical part of his practice, and I knew we had to have the methyl B12. I was like, oh, we're not going back. We have to do this. So I remember that she'd said that was Dr. Neubrander's protocol, and so I picked up a couple of books, and I was reading where he had written about the methyl B12, and so I called the office and begged to be a patient, and they said that was fine, and we could do a lot of things on the computer, so we wouldn't have to go up to New Jersey, all the time. So we became patients of Dr. Neubrander, and he put us in touch with Hopewell because our previous doctor wasn't giving us Hopewell shots. we were using a different pharmacy. And Dr. Neubrander said, I believe you'll be able to see a difference with these shots. And then after we do this for a while, then we'll go to every day. We start taking the Hopewell shots, and it was like another awakening. All of a sudden, we were getting calls from the from the preschool. Well, he did this today, and the social skills therapy he was in, the lady was writing down. He offered somebody an ice cream cone made out of blocks today. These were all new and amazing things. More eye contact, more pragmatic language, more connectedness. That was such a big thing. More connectedness. We quit seeing the zone out. God, that was huge. He'd be in the middle of a social skills therapy or OT or his private speech, and he would just zone out, and you couldn't. You could get him back after you called his name, a few times, but he would just zone. He just wasn't connected. Even riding home from school, he'd look out the window. He's just so disconnected. And all of a sudden, after the Hopewell shots, we started seeing connectedness and the pragmatic language and trying more. Even the social part was it was getting better. He didn't have the language yet to close a lot of conversational circles with his peers, but he was following them. He's following them on the playground. He wanted to be with them, and even if he couldn't carry his language part, he was beginning to assimilate. It was unbelievable. All of a sudden, Plan B at the mall wasn't such a big deal. All of a sudden, Plan B at restaurants wasn't such a big deal. All of a sudden, having people into our home wasn't such a big deal. We'd have parties, and we'd would have to go check on him every once in a while because he could still get overwhelmed. But he was trying to assimilate. He was running with the crowd for the most part, which was such a big change from having to have one-on-one with either his daddy or me, separated from the rest of the crowd. It was unbelievable. And like I said, he still didn't have the language that he needed to keep up with his same age typical peers. But with my daughters, who were a little bit older and could kind of give him the words, he was doing so much better. He was so much more connected. That was it was amazing. And he wanted to be connected. It was almost like he had the pause button pressed on him, and the methyl B12, especially from Hopewell, pressed the play. All of a sudden, he was living, and he would smile, and he was happier. He started laughing and smiling, and truly playing instead of just lining up this, or it was more purposeful. He even got into Toy Story and started reenacting some of that stuff. It was unbelievable. I cannot tell you the change from this child pre-methyl B12 to having been on methyl B12 from Hopewell, and especially once a day. It made such a gigantic difference. I couldn't believe it. We could not believe it. We thought, this is a miracle. This is an absolute miracle. So we're so happy with that, and we're still riding that wave. And then we started the HBOT. So Hudson's language is emerging, and he's doing so great. And I feel like I can't even really ask for any more because he's connected and he's alive. So still some major problems processing, though. He's he's got a lot of issues. We had him tested last spring before he was supposed to go into a kindergarten setting last fall. And the psychologist and the educational specialist that tested him, I think. It took 2 weeks to get him through the test, and they said, we really don't recommend a public school setting. He really needs to be in a private setting, small class numbers, for children with special needs, because he's not processing. And we're like, oh, okay, all right. So we were digesting everything that they said, and our financial situation changed to where we were not going to be able to afford the private setting for children with special needs anymore, and I was going to have to put him in the public kindergarten. We had an IEP already for speech because he started the county program at 3 doing the speech, in the school. And so I talked with one of the kindergarten teachers, and I gave him the scores. I was like, I don't know. I don't even know what you do with a child like this. And she said, well, the only thing we can do is put him in the queue for for an IEP early. We'll try October and see if he can handle being in the classroom all day, and we'll go from there. It's like, okay. So anyhow, I couldn't believe that he would even submit to being in a classroom like that for that many hours of day. Even in the lunchroom, I used to take him to lunch because I'd go meet my older girls who were a few years older than him, and he couldn't take the lunchroom. Even then, he would scream, he would cry, get under the table and yell, and I really didn't even know how he was going to deal with the lunchroom part of it. So anyway, I'm in constant contact with this teacher, and this teacher is an angel on earth. She texts me 3 times the first day. Oh, everything's fine. I was so worried. But anyway, so we have an IEP meeting in October, and we're looking at all of the test scores from the previous testing he had done back in the spring, from the psychologist and the educational specialist that said, he would not survive in a regular kindergarten classroom, that he could not learn in a regular kindergarten classroom. So we're looking, at how he's doing, and the teacher says, he's doing okay. He's going to need help. Right now, the kindergarten curriculum is very rote. He's got those rote skills, and the processing is going to become an issue. But we'll just keep close contact, and we'll reconvene when we see that part of it fall off, and when he's going to have to get pulled out for extra help, or we're going to have to think about a different setting. So I'm like, okay, I'm fully expecting that to happen at any time. So we start the HBOT. It's the end of October, doing the brutal, initiation protocol. Oh my God. We started in October and we ended in November doing that, and it was hard, but it was so worth it. I'll never forget. They were doing a science unit in class, and they were talking about living versus non-living things. And Hudson came home and he says, "Mom, is salt?" He grabbed it off the table during dinner. "Is salt living or is it non-living?" And I was like, "I don't know. What do you think?" And he goes, "It's non-living." And he put it down. He goes, "Is this spoon living or non-living?" I said, "I don't know, Hudson. What do you think?" He goes, "It's not living. It doesn't need air," or whatever he said. But he started to give me reasons. I saw reasoning begin, and applications happened. And it was his brain, the cogs started turning. And it was unbelievable because 2 months before, never would have happened. 3 months before, whatever. It wouldn't have happened. All of a sudden, he was coming up with his own completely, his own applications of things he had learned in school, and taking something he had learned in one environment and applying it to another had always been an issue. That had always been an issue. But all of a sudden we saw it happening right before our very eyes. The fact that he was assimilating like he was, the fact that he had substitute teachers come in and he would be okay, was insane. When he was in preschool, before we started the MB12, they called me from preschool one day and said, "We had a sub in Hudson's class and he shut his eyes for a solid hour and a half. He would not talk to her, and he would not do anything. He just shut his eyes, and he finally went to sleep after about an hour and a half." And that was awful. But it was demonstrative of the fact that he wasn't assimilating. There could be no change. Any of that would throw him for a loop. He would have subs come in. And it got so routine that, his teacher wouldn't even alert me before we had a sub, so I wouldn't even be able to prep him. Things happened, life happened, and he dealt with it. And we had never, ever, ever seen that before. We were used to having plan B, plan B, plan B2, plan B3, plan B4, because we had to have them to maintain everybody's sense of sanity. So all of a sudden, we saw the reasoning happen. We saw the social adjustments. We saw amazing things. He was learning like the other kids. He was coming home and saying, "Oh, we talked about compound words today," and just like the other kids, he was. He said, "Oh, I played with Jenna at recess." Just like the other kids, just like they would come home and tell their moms. It was crazy. We had a meeting, and the assistant principal was there, and she said, when I went in there, I couldn't even find him at first because he wasn't standing out until he started doing his fingers, and I was like, oh, there he is, because he wasn't standing out. He was assimilating, and we couldn't believe it. So we kept tabs with the teacher, of course. I was talking to her, most every week, actually, because we knew the other shoe would fall, and we'd have to meet to have another IEP meeting so he could at least get pull-out services this year. And you know what? It never happened. He was always able to keep up, which is unbelievable, because this was a child who was not processing, and before the methyl B12 wasn't even talking, nothing. And the growth was unbelievable. When we were still doing private speech prior to the financial situation changing, even his therapist then said his gains are not typical of a child within his population. This is amazing. And he was doing amazing, amazing things in a relatively short amount of time. So it's the end of the year, and we have an IEP meeting just to kind of close out and looking forward, see what we're going to need to do for first grade. And his teacher is like, she had a list of classroom interventions that she did, front and center in the classroom. So when he started stimming, she could, kind of pull him out of it. And lots of physical gestures and repetition with directions. And she said, I don't even think he's going to need those. And I was like, oh, we gotta, no, we gotta have to keep that in place. And she's like, well, okay, we can do that. She goes, but we are at the end of the year, and he still doesn't have to have pull-out services to stay with his class. And she says, that's not to say that it won't happen next year. She says, first grade is a different ball game, but he's managed to keep up with his peers. And, and as long as that happens, he's still, we don't have to change our services. And we were sitting there talking about that. It was me, his speech therapist there, the assistant principal, and his teacher. And we just sat around and looked at each other like, are you kidding me? That his teacher was able to make all the accommodations that he needed when going in there. We knew he was going to have more, because he wasn't even able to assimilate before the methyl B12 and the HBOT. We just sat there just in amazement, just in amazement. This child is a miracle. This child is a miracle. He even with the HBOT, his little personality. We started seeing it develop. He was silly, and he would tell dumb jokes, and he would laugh at his dumb jokes, and it was an aliveness that we hadn't seen ever before with him. I can't tell you the difference between this child before HBOT and methyl B12, where he was zoned out much of the time, alone much of the time, anxious most of the time, and echolalic, to the methyl B12, especially the methyl B12 with Hopewell and doing the once a day protocol, and then the HBOT. This child has gone. He's a different child, and I feel guilty a lot of times, even calling him special needs because now he's happy and he does his little thing and 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 it's just unbelievable, and it blows my mind every time I think about it. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. Thank you so much.